if he'd been around, the story would have been all over the prison in a single day. And, given Percy's last name, an unfortunate one, in this context, it was a story that would have been told with the relish of high glee for years to come. You talk about this to anyone, and you'll all be on the breadlines in a week, he whispered fiercely. It was the sort of crack that would have made me want to swat him under other circumstances, but under these, I only pitied him. I think he saw that pity, and it made it worse with him, like having an open wound scoured with nettles. What goes on here stays here, Dean said quietly. You don't have to worry about that. Percy looked back over his shoulder, toward Delacroix's cell. Brutal was just locking the door, and from inside, deadly clear, we could still hear Delacroix giggling. Percy's look was as black as thunder. I thought of telling him that you reaped what you sowed in this life, and then decided this might not be the right time for a scripture lesson. As for him, he began, but never finished. He left, instead, head down, to go into the storage room and look for a dry pair of pants. He's so pretty, Wharton said in a dreamy voice. Harry told him to shut the fuck up before he went down to the restraint room just on general damned principles. Wharton folded his arms on his chest, closed his eyes, and appeared to go to sleep. "9. The night before Delacroix's execution came down hotter and muggier than ever, 81 degrees by the thermometer outside the admin ready room window when I clocked in at 6. "81 at the end of October, think of that, and thunder rumbling in the west like it does in July. I'd met a member of my congregation in town that afternoon, and he had asked me, with apparent seriousness, if I thought such unseasonable weather could be a sign of the last times. I said that I was sure not, but it crossed my mind that it was last times for Edward Delacroix, all right. Yes, indeed it was. Bill Dodge was standing in the door to the exercise yard, drinking coffee and smoking him a little smoke. He looked around at me and said, "Well, look at here. Paul Edgecombe, big as life and twice as ugly. How'd the day go, Billy?" "All right." "Delacroix?" "Fine. He seems to understand it's tomorrow, and yet it's like he don't understand." You know how most of them are when the end finally comes for them. I nodded. Wharton? Bill laughed. What a comedian. Makes Jack Benny sound like a Quaker. He told Rolf Wettermark that he ate strawberry jam out of his wife's pussy. What did Rolf say? That he wasn't married. Said it must have been his mother Wharton was thinking of. I laughed, and hard. That really was funny, in a low sort of way. And it was good just to be able to laugh without feeling like someone was lighting matches way down low in my gut. Bill laughed with me, then turned the rest of his coffee out in the yard, which was empty except for a few shuffling trustees, most of whom had been there for 1,000 years or so. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off, and unfocused heat lightning flashed in the darkening sky overhead. Bill looked up uneasily, his laughter dying. I tell you what, though, he said. I don't like this weather much. Feels like something's gonna happen. Something bad. About that he was right. The bad thing happened right around 10:15 that night. That was when Percy killed Mr. Jingles. 10. At first it seemed like it was going to be a pretty good night in spite of the heat. John Coffey was being his usual quiet self, Wild Bill was making out to be Mild Bill, and Delacroix was in good spirits for a man who had a date with old Sparky in a little more than 24 hours. He did understand what was going to happen to him, at least on the most basic level. He had ordered chili for his last meal and gave me special instructions for the kitchen. Tell him to lay on dat hot sauce, he said. Tell him the kind dat really jump up your throat and say howdy, the green stuff. None of dat mild. Dat stuff griped me like a motherfucker. I can't get off the toilet the next day, but I don't think I gonna have a problem this time, n'est-ce pas? Most of them worry about their immortal souls with a kind of moronic ferocity, but Delacroix pretty much dismissed my questions about what he wanted for spiritual comfort in his last hours.